Guys, welcome to episode 4 in this series. The realities associated with becoming a GRC specialist or GRC analyst, if you want to look at it from that perspective. And I also have Pradeep sharing in this conversation. Pradeep, thanks for joining as usual.
Thank you, Richie.
Okay, awesome. And guys, we definitely look forward to having a very interesting, interactive conversation. And it's pretty much we trying to share with you our experiences, our skill in this particular field in terms of sharing our passion for the GRC aspect of cybersecurity. And this is very important. We see this as an element within the organization that is very important to maintaining, creating that alignment between all the various um, units or elements in an organization to break down that silo within the organization. So GRC definitely a very good part for persons who are definitely trying to get into the cybersecurity space as cybersecurity professionals. Um, so over the past few weeks, for persons who have been actually following, we have actually been looking at the practical realities that are associated within the field itself that you need to look out for, you need to be prepared for, things that you need to expect, things that are going to be required of you as a professional within the industry. And so far, we highlighted a number of, well, two very important points as it relates to this. If it is that you want to get into just about any profession, any skill set, any career path, two very important recommendations that I always recommend in these conversations, guys, is to align yourself with someone who is actually in the field, find out what it is that they do, build a strong relationship, seek mentorship, seek their guidance within that avenue so that you can actually learn from these persons to actually build your skill set accordingly. And secondly, which we have been actually been doing over the past 3 weeks, is looking at resumes, sorry, job descriptions, actual job descriptions, and looking at all the requirements of these job descriptions in terms of the skill set, the necessary tasks that you are required to do as a GRC professional, and actually aligning yourself with these skill sets. So at the end of the day, if you are able to execute all of these relevant tasks, and no one is actually saying that you must be able to do every single task of a job description. So compare number of job descriptions, and when you really do the research, when you really take the time to compare, then you recognize that there are a number of similarities that exist within these roles for a GRC analyst or a GRC professional. So that's one of the best ways to actually get yourself, started looking at the various platforms that are used to carry out GRC compliance. Functions. There are so many within the market. So getting yourself familiar with all of those. There are so many training out as it relates to various platforms that you can actually use or learn from to build various GRC compliance related activities. So so today we definitely continue to look at our job description, the requirements, and let me quickly just bring this back to your attention for persons who have been following so far. You might be familiar with this job description, but let me just share my screen with you for you to see the actual job description that we have been working with so far. So at least you have an idea as to what it is that we're actually trying to achieve by doing this. So, right. So there we have the job description. Um, okay, great. So hopefully you're able to see my screen much better. So from the job description, then you recognize that there are a number of tasks that are required, and this is a job description for a GRC specialist. Right? That's a GRC specialist, can be a GRC analyst, whichever case you want to look at it, right? So in this case, they have approximately 13 different job requirements or job responsibilities that this organization is looking forward to as it relates to the role of a GRC specialist within this particular organization. And so far, we have actually looked at the very first two job responsibilities, and that has to do with developing and implementing IT governance policies and procedures in accordance with ISO 27001, the PCI DSS, the GDPR, and other best practices. So we have actually completed looking at that particular job responsibility in our previous series that you can actually take the time. If you go to the CyberJA YouTube channel, then you can actually find all of the details in regards to those sessions that you have actually completed. And we have also looked at how it is that you collaborate with other IT business units to establish and maintain a comprehensive IT risk management framework. And today we are at task job responsibility number 3, which involves performing regular audits of IT systems, processes, and controls across all business units to identify potential risks, gaps, and gaps in compliance. Right. So that is what we're going to be focusing on for this particular session. So as it relates to IT audits, so as I've mentioned before, Pradeep and I were basically sharing our experience. I mean, talking about all of these items that you can actually use to build your skill set. And the thing is, guys, that it's difficult to train someone for maybe just to tell you how to. It goes beyond maybe just talking to say this is what you need to do. You actually have to take that time, the initiative to take this information, to look at various documentations, and to practically see how best it is that you can actually execute some of these tasks on your own. Do the research and follow some of these processes, techniques, steps, become familiar with the various, frameworks, auditing standards, procedures. Once you're accustomed to all of these things, it's a matter of actually practicing. Every organization is different. Things are different within organization, but some of the principles actually remains the same. So the key is to understand principles behind all of these things as it relates to your role, right? So understand the role, understand the responsibilities, understand the requirements, and align yourself accordingly and be able to demonstrate or show how best you are able to execute these tasks. So looking at task number 3, so Pradeep, based on your experience so far, can you talk to us a little bit more as it relates to, just to give persons an idea, in the case that they might be new to the environment of IT auditing? And we are not going to be going down into all of the details, as this in of itself is a comprehensive activity that takes practice, understanding, and in most cases, when you join an organization, you're going to be working as part of a team. In most cases, to be a part of their overall IT, their maybe compliance department, their auditing department, working as part of a team in most cases, unless you're actually applying for that senior role that you're going to be responsible for leading that role, right? So it's a matter of application, taking the time to really apply yourself that really makes a difference and be trainable in the process. So, Pradeep, can you, talk to us about,
Yeah,
when we talk
yeah,
about the IT audit?
yeah.
Yeah,
Right. So thanks, Richie.
yeah,
The IT audit is basically auditing the IT systems. It's a systematic examination or the evaluation of the organization's IT system. Uh, Systems can be any applications, right? And the infrastructure where the applications are hosted, the processes involved around those systems and infrastructures, and then the control, right? So let's take an example: IT system, maybe ERP system, which is enterprise resource planning system, right? Maybe customer relationship management system. So these systems needs to be evaluated, examined, if they are performing, if they are capable enough to do the required activity, right? Maybe the business intelligence system, financial management system. Infrastructure could be where all these systems are hosted, if it is the cloud or the in-house servers or the data centers, network equipment, what are the equipments used, storage systems. So assessing all those infrastructures, IT applications, and then the processes involved around those. For example, the incident management. If there is an incident happen within the organization, how do we manage that? So that step-by-step process, the workflow involved, and then the who should resolve the incident, who should be the owner, all the sort of stuff, and the change management, maybe the problem management. Release management is one of the familiar, everybody should know about it, like how do we release, and how do we do the releases, right? We have maybe monthly. So what are all the processes involved around them? What are the controls we have? For example, um, IT controls are implemented to ensure the software and systems releases are planned, right? They need to be planned. The release should be planned, tested way before the going into the production, right? And deployed in a controlled manner. Like, it's not like anybody can do the deployment. We should have all the controls in place, right? Roles and responsibility defined, proper change management, check in and check out of the code. So those all the controls should be organized. They should be in organized manner, right? The release planning and scheduling. So this is all about reviewing the system, examining and evaluating all these the systems and processes involved around the IT. That's all about the IT audit, Richie.
Yeah, great point there, Pradeep. And for me, one of the things is that whatever you're doing, always, guys, always uh, take things from the basic, understand the fundamentals. Whatever it is that you are doing, always be able to deconstruct, construct, deconstruct, construct, whichever your task is. So always learn the fundamentals. That's very important, right? So know that you understand, what IT auditing is all about in a nutshell. Pretty much, and its purpose, right? And also, when we talk about it, the processes and controls, right? So that is actually one of the roles based on the job description that you will be required to do as that GRC specialist within this organization. So you definitely will have to understand when it comes down to processes, the controls, what is it that you're actually talking about? What is that? What is it that is required of you? So always go to the basic, the fundamentals. Look at what is. There's no need. That's one of the great things about, cybersecurity. IT. There's no need to reinvent the wheel, guys. Right? The resources are there. The tools are there. It's a matter of being creative and learning those. Fundamentals. So going back to the job description. Well, first of all, let us quickly just bring this back on screen for you guys to see exactly. So, I mean, why do you audit? Right? So that's one of the greatest questions, right? Auditing in terms of, and this is not a case whereby you might be required to audit if you're a GRC specialist. It all depends on the roles, right? This is just an item. This is just a requirement based on this job functions. But these are some of the skill set, the things that are normally required. Right? Conducting your risk assessment, performing a business impact analysis, all of these things along the way. So, and the main thing about auditing, is to provide assurance that identified gaps are taken care of. I mean, desired and established, recommended, or agreed upon activities are being followed, in some cases to meet compliance standards. And the key question in all of this is, how do we conduct an audit of IT systems, processes, and controls? That's the big question. And first of all, the aim of what I am doing or about to share is based on experience. And this is not cast in stone, guys. Very important. I mean, many persons, there are many standards, there are different approaches. Persons do things differently within organizations. So I always recommend that you do your research. I mean, take additional steps to look at all of the necessary best practices. So what I'll be doing is pretty much just to give you an idea as to some of the things to expect. At least you have a baseline from which to work to execute your duties and functions. When you get into organizations, the thing is that you will have this understanding, but the thing is, organizations do things differently. However, they definitely require of you to know the fundamentals, to understand the principles behind what it is that you're doing. So in the background, you should not be blank to what it is that they're asking you to do. You should have that basic understanding, and then you will then learn what and the how of how the organization, do things on a regular basis. I mean, am I correct about that, Pradeep, based on experience?
Right. So, right, that's correct. We'll talk about the basic, very basic process, which is the release management. Like everybody in the IT team does, right? So that will give more understanding. Why do we do actually IT audit? So yeah.
Okay, great. So you wanted to share more on that point before I actually move further?
Yeah, like we were talking about the release management process, right? So it should be in controlled manner, like we discussed earlier. Um, the release planning and scheduling is the one control, right? That needs to be planned effectively, right? And that involves a lot of planning stuff. You need to have the documentation created, the step-by-step plans, and the scheduling of the releases to minimize conflicts, right? You may have some downstream upstream systems where you need to plan properly, otherwise they will be down if you do the production release, and if you don't inform to the upstream or downstream systems. So the planning scheduling is very important, and that's one control. And that includes creating release calendar, coordinating with the stakeholders, and identifying any dependencies or the constraint, right? Dependencies needs to be resolved before we do in the production. Sometimes we don't find issues, and production may go differently, right? So we need to have the release documentation created, documentation, so that it will be, the organization might be following certain process, right? May not be related to the, any other third party third party things. So testing and quality assurance also, the testing needs to be performed before and after the release, right? And that should be up to the quality of the organization. And then environment management, right? Proper management should be there. Otherwise, if something goes wrong in production, if organization may not afford that. So we should have the disaster recovery in place. That is another control. That can include maintaining the separate environment also, maybe the staging environment before we go in the production. That can be another control. There are many controls we can talk about. Managing the access, like who should do what. Everybody cannot do everything, right? One will check out codes, and other team maybe just do the migration from UAT to different environment, pre-prod or staging to production, right? So that consistency should be there across the environment to prevent unauthorized change, and the data corruption,
Sure.
right? And the deployment and rollback procedures, right? Release approvals and authorizations, that is very important. Your higher management or the senior management need to approve the plan properly, approve the plan and what change needs to be done. That is one control. So we are talking about this planning and what are all controls we can have so that the release will not go wrong, right? Release is a process.
Sure.
Release is a process, and then we're talking about the controls, right? The post release monitoring and support, that could be another control. What are all the post release activities needs to be performed? Let's say monitor the logs, monitor, get the feedback from users, right? Do the performance test, metrics. We should produce it to the stakeholders, and then they should be happy with that. So its purpose to assess the effectiveness and efficiency and the security, to ensure that it's aligned to the business objective and the industry best practices also. Sometimes not the industry best practices, sometimes your organization's best practices are there, those needs to be followed. So do we need to talk about the goals of IT audit now or later?
No, we could,
Okay.
well, probably just quickly, just because I'm actually going into actually looking at an actual, I mean, audit, a sample audit, as well as to look at the ISACA recommended process for actually carrying out an audit. So you could definitely mention those objectives, and then I can actually move into
Okay.
the actual
Okay, thanks.
process.
So what could be the goals, like assessing the controls? Like I said, we have the release management process, right? That processes should have the control. For example, rollback procedure. If something goes wrong, what is the rollback procedure? So that control should be assessed that should be evaluated properly, and adequacy and effectiveness of this control, right? To ensure we are able to roll back the system if something goes wrong. This involves reviewing policies, procedure, access controls, and data protection mechanism. A lot of things will involve vulnerabilities, weaknesses, that could create a risk to the organizations. Then compliance verification. So um, another goal could be the compliance verification, which means IT audit should verify the compliance with relevant laws and regulations, or the industry standards, for example HIPAA, um, GDPR, the general data protection regulations, and the data security standards, PCI DSS, right? Lot of industry specific compliance should be verified. And another goal could be the risk identification. So when we review something, when we assess something, right, when we do audit, obviously we'll find some flaws, and that can prevent some of the risk. So it can help IT team to identify any risk associated, or assess the risk associated. If you already know that, then other goal could be the process improvement, right? If everything is working fine and good, then IT, one of the main IT goal is to improve the performance. So that could be the IT audit. They may advise, auditors may provide insights from the different, because they are doing in other departments also in the same company, or maybe outside also. So they will provide you the insights how to improve the process efficiency, right? Within the organization, by examining the governance, project management, maybe how you are processing the project, they may advise you something. So that could be one of the main goal. Data integrity and accuracy, IT governance, those could be also some of the goals. And then what are the processes and controls involved? We already discussed, like just the example I gave, change management, incident management. Yeah, so that those are the some of the goals,
Sure,
Richie.
sure, definitely. So having a goal in place, all of these things are very important. Um, Let me see quickly. Seeing, I think there's a question. Hello, Pradeep. What job role should someone who has just transitioned to GRC be looking out for from your perspective, and what skill set should they acquire aside from the fundamentals? Um, well, you could answer if you want me to answer then.
Yeah, in the first session we discussed all the skills required for um, transitioning to GRC role. Maybe one or two tools should be sufficient. If you know one, if you don't know, also you need to kind of get the certification of any GRC tool, or maybe if you have any experience. Um, Other than that, you can definitely look for the processes or the industry standards like ISA 2007 27001 we discussed in the last meeting, right? You can have an overview of those items or those things. That will definitely help um, to to present yourself, right? Basically, we have to, if you are fresher, we have to showcase what exactly we know about the GRC. So it's all about um, there are different industry standards you can go through. Maybe if you want certification, you can go through the certification also. Those are the things I would suggest. If you need any specific, you can ping me, or you can send a message to me or Richie. We can help you more.
Yeah, sure, definitely. I mean, right on point. And that's also one of the reasons why we're actually doing and having these conversations and this particular session. Um, I mean, just to bring back this on screen, talking about skill set. These are some of the skill sets, right? Being able to conduct your risk assessment, being able to do your audit of IT systems, being able to develop policies and procedures, being able to uh, execute the various requirements of these compliance standards, right? So these are some of the various things that you want to become familiar with: frameworks, compliance regulations, auditing processes, all of these various, I mean, established standards, I mean, that exist within the environment, right? So we are looking at task 3. So let us look at how it is that you actually perform the regular audits of these IT systems. That's to add to what, I mean, Pradeep I've just outlined before, right? Based on the fact that when it comes on to auditing, um, there are certain fundamentals, organizations of these different principles. And my aim at this point is not to actually go into all the details to walk through. I mean, this is something that takes a lot of time. Uh, I mean, working along with someone, seeing the process being done from start to finish, right? So it's all about creating the awareness. I'm going to be showing you a number of exercises, examples to give you an idea, so that if it is that you want to get into this space, at least you could say, oh, yes, I've seen this before. Um, these are the things that I need to be looking out for. These are the things that I need to have in mind when you talk about, I mean, conducting an audit of IT systems, processes, and controls, right? So, very importantly, when it comes on to this, guys, is let me quickly just share with you also, all right? I think this is very important. Let me bring this on screen for you guys to see. All right, so right? So what you're looking at is the ISACA, I mean, standards, right? So this is also an organization that does a lot of work as it relates to, I mean, for persons who want to acquire that skill set to become a GRC or information, I mean, security professional, right? They also have a number of certification, a number of documentation, standards, COBIT, all of these things that you can actually learn from, right? These are the platforms, these are the resources that you can actually tune into to gain additional knowledge, right? You have the ISAC, or you have, I mean, ISO 27001 documentations, the NIST documentations, and the list goes on. Risk compliance regulations, right? Mastering those skill set, conducting various risk assessments. All of these are activities and skills that will help to make you into a, I mean, a GRC, I mean, professional. Seeing an additional question: how often should IT compliance audits be conducted? Well, that's a very good question, but it also depends on the organization itself and the need for it. Is it in relation to a particular compliance request? So it depends on the nature of the organization and also the requirements based on various compliance regulations, right? So it varies in organizations. So that's very important. So when it comes on to, I mean,
Yeah,
auditing
sometimes
of,
they do quarterly.
yes, go ahead.
Sorry, I was answering to Patrick. Sometimes they do quarterly, but very less, right? It depends on the risk and appetite of the particular organization. Most of the audits are done yearly, and quarterly are done internally. We call them internal audits. So, but the third party, like the I or any government audit needs to be done. Those are usually done yearly basis. It all depends on the um, organization and their requirement.
Yeah, that's the key thing, right? It varies. There's no set, I mean, way of actually doing what. So it all depends. And there are cases where, for example, an incident might have occurred in the organization, right? That you have these sporadic, I mean, ad hoc audit requests, right? So it all depends on the environment itself. So when it comes on to understanding the whole audit process, and it doesn't really matter if you are doing an IT audit or maybe an information systems or maybe a compliance audit, right? There are certain principles, there are certain approaches that actually remains the same. What changes is actually the scope, the context, right? What it is that you're documenting, what it is that you're looking for, the assurance that you're trying to bring to the persons who actually request this particular audit, right? The documentation process, the system that you use, the method of collecting information, all of these things, right? So, and I pretty much, guys, this is just to give you a quick understanding. So, what you're looking at is the ISAC, and this is their typical audit process, right? So, it involves this audit process is broken down into three main sections: your planning, your fieldwork documentation, and reporting and follow up, right? So that's the base. Those are the three main categories that involves, I mean, just about any audit. No matter, I mean, no matter how simple the audit might be, right? It involves planning for it. You have to plan. You have to have your team. You have to have the necessary meetings, all of these things, right? Or it is that you're going to be gathering all this information, the following procedures. And you will definitely have your systems, the documentation. In some organizations, they might collect all of these information or these processes by following various Excel documents, or they might have those um, systems, platforms. I mean, there are a number of platforms that allows you to collaborate, and that is what most organizations are doing, moving away from um, those independent, um, isolated Excel sheets, but rather moving towards platforms that allows teams of auditors and professionals to collaborate. I'm able to input information here within a form. You are able to see it. You are able to review. Someone is able to approve. Someone is able to update, change. So at the end of the day, you have an overall audit, I mean, program, process being completed, right? So for sure, I mean, hope that we have actually answered your question on that point. Right. So looking at this, guys, right? So let me quickly just walk you through what you're actually seeing on screen for you to get an understanding of um, let me see, audit process as is outlined by ISACA, right? So that's the planning. You have a field work. So what they're saying is that in the planning phase, then you have to, that's involved, determine your audit subject, right? So in planning, and that's the first thing that you want to step, right? First step in conducting an IT audit is to plan the audit. And this includes you want to define the audit scope, right? What it is that you're actually auditing. Is it a particular department, a particular thing that you're looking for? Is it that the entire organization, right? The scope, the objectives, the method, or the methodology that you're going to be using, right? Understanding the IT environment. So you have to spend that time, as I mentioned before, going into your organization to understand the structure. And a very good auditor is someone who actually understands the functions, the operations, how it is that the organization operates within the overall processes of the organization so that you're able to ask the right questions from the right persons, right? So, I think Pradeep had mentioned this before, is that you have to understand your environment, right? Gain a comprehensive understanding of the organization. And it also requests that you, another thing that is involved in the process is doing your risk assessment, assessing the risk associated with the IT system, the processes, and the control. So these are skills that you would have to develop and learn, along the way, right? Um, Gathering the evidence, right? So that's very important, gathering the evidence in the process, right? Um, and these evidence can be gathered through a number of different, methods. Your interviews well known, your interviews, your questionnaires, your documentations, right? Evaluating the evidence. And once evidence has been gathered, then this evidence is then evaluated to assist for the effectiveness of the organization's IT controls. Therefore, you as the auditor will be considering a number of factors when evaluating the evidence. You're looking at the completeness, the accuracy, the evidence, the audit objectives, the reliability of the evidence, the evaluating the IT controls, right? Testing the IT system, the processes, the controls, documenting and reporting. So these are all the various um, activities that you would have to be very familiar with in terms of what is actually entailed in terms of determining the audit subject, defining the audit objective, setting the audit scope, performing the pre-audit planning, determining the procedures that you're going to be using, the acquiring the data, testing the controls. All of these fall into the fieldwork and documentation phase. Right? And then you also have your reporting phase. And that is where you gather the report requirements, you draft your report, you issue the report, and also do the necessary follow ups. Right? So, this is pretty much to give you an idea of what is involved in that that audit process, right? That is required based on this job description. So, becoming very familiar with this process then puts you in a better position. So, as the GRC analyst, then you're going to be taking that time to look into all of these elements to find out what it is that is required of all of these activities, and then you execute your job role accordingly. Right? So that's the key thing, guys, to understand, have these principles in mind. So, with that said, let us quickly look at a quick example, right, that demonstrates this, process. All right, so let us look at an example that will be able to make a little bit more realistic for you to follow. So in this case, it says that this is a sample case IT audit of the processes, controls, policies, document outlining all the steps that I have just mentioned earlier. So in this case, we have this particular corporation, and this is the auditee, right? So there you have your auditee, the date, Bearing in mind the audit scope, in this case, it says the IT systems, the processes, and controls related to the company's financial reporting. So that's your audit scope, right? So you understand your audit scope, then you have your audit objectives. In this case, it's to assess the effectiveness of the company's IT controls in safeguarding its financial assets and information to ensure the company's financial statements are accurate and reliable. Then you go to your methodology, which we mentioned earlier in the process. And in this case, then the audit will be conducted using a combination of, right? So you have your interviews, your document review, and you also have your system testing, which Pradeep mentioned earlier, as it relates to looking at those various, system testing. And I'm actually going to be talking about these more in terms of when we talk about the system testing. So the interviews will be conducted with the various stakeholders in your organization, IT staff, business users, management, doing your document reviews. And this is where you have the company's IT policies, right? The IT policies, their procedures and documentations are actually reviewed. And when these are reviewed based on established agreements or established requirements based on necessary compliance that you're trying to meet. So initially, you would have done your gap analysis to see where the organization is, where it is that they need to go, all the changes that they need to make within the system. So by auditing, by reviewing these policies, procedures in place, you can actually take these documents and say, let me see what's in this procedure. Let me see what's in this policy. Then you will then look at the system or the organization to see whether or not that is what they're actually doing. If they are not doing these things, then that is where the gaps are. These are the things that you have to report on in terms of whether or not they're actually complying with these things that have been initially established, that the management, the stakeholders are actually looking for as part of the assurance, the guarantee, that satisfaction that yes, we are in alignment with a particular, standard or regulation, uh, right? So then you move on to your system testing, which look at the effectiveness of the company's IT controls will be tested by simulating real world transactions, right? So when you're talking about, IT testing, in some cases you might have, um, let me see, penetration tests being conducted, right? Looking for weaknesses in the systems. You might be looking at persons actually doing various tasks, executing various operations, seeing whether or not what happens when someone clicks on a particular icon or click on a save or do a particular process. What is actually happening based on the rights that have been assigned? Is this individual authorized to do X based on the established policies, procedures? Is the controls in place actually executing accordingly? So, being a GRC professional, from time to time, persons might say that you do not have to have technical skills. But the thing is that it is very beneficial, guys, right? Coming from an IT perspective, coming from I mean, that background of being an IT technician, network system administrator, then it gives me a better appreciation. It gives me a better understanding of all of these principles. So when you understand these things, take that time to understand the fundamentals of information technology. It will make your life much easier in the GRC space in terms of being able to communicate in a language among your peers, among persons in the organizations that make more sense when it comes on to asking the right questions. For example, IT controls. If it is that you do not understand these principles of what it is that we are talking about when we refer to IT controls, then you will not be able to effectively or efficiently execute your job roles. So no one is saying deep dive into becoming a super expert at these technical areas, but having those high level fundamental understanding always pays off. right? It makes a difference in carrying out these job functions. All right. So then once that is completed, then the next thing that you'd want to do is let me quickly. So you move further looking at your audit findings, right? And this is a sample case study based on what you have just mentioned. So the company's IT controls are generally effective in safeguarding XYZ. These are the findings that you would have discovered, you would have documented, and you are observed in your documentations based on the organizations, then making recommendations, and then having management sign off, management response based on the meetings that are held within the organizations, right? So management agrees with the audit findings, recommendations, where changes need to be implemented, actions need to be taken, and the list goes on. So now, based on the case, are these document reviews done? Right? Those are two quite important questions that I think I need to share with you. I mean, how are these document reviews done in terms of actually reviewing the documents in relation to what is required? Right? So as it relates to document reviews, right? These are a key part of any IT audit, and they are used to gather evidence about the organization's IT systems, the processes, and the controls, which Pradeep went in details about earlier, right? And the specific questions that are asked during a document review will vary depending on the specific audit objectives. That's very important. And there are some general questions that are often asked during documents reviews. Questions such as what are the organization's IT policies and procedures? These are the things that you would have to ask and to document. These are documents that you would have to look at, right? They have various schedules, and I'm going to be actually showing you an overall audit program process, right, as we move along. So stay tuned for that process, right? So uh, who are these policies and procedures implemented, right? Who is responsible for implementing these policies and procedures? Who are these policies and procedures monitored and reviewed? What are the organization's IT controls? How effective are these controls? And this is where you would have to actually test those controls. Are there any gaps or weaknesses in the organization's IT controls? That is where you would have to do that gap analysis, that risk assessment in the organization, right? And these answers to these questions can definitely provide you, the auditor, with valuable information about the organization's IT systems, its processes, and also its controls. Right? Very important. So, Pradeep, do you have any further insights or inputs at this point?
Um, this is for how do we perform it practically?
Yes. Actually,
No,
following
yeah,
life
like
cycle.
it really depends on what process. At this initial level, you will have to depend on the senior management and what process is being followed. So it's really depends on the organization, and yeah.
Okay, great, sure. So once that is completed, then how do you practically test these IT controls, right? So, and Pradeep had actually mentioned some of these, things that you have actually looked at before in terms of actually testing those necessary IT controls within the organization, right? So, um, okay, great. So, as you had mentioned, looking at the various inspection, observations, inquiries, asking the questions, observing process, doing all of these roles, right, actually makes the difference in the overall process, right? And Let me
Maybe I'll
quickly
give you
also
I'll
share.
give an example.
Yes, sure, go ahead.
So, like, how do we practically perform? Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
So, like we are talking about how do we really perform practically, right? We'll have a GRC system. There we create an audit, right? Reviewing the release management process, the one we talked about, and then we actually go to the project based project. For example, we have 10 projects running there. We will collect the release management documents from those 10 projects, right? And then those release documents will be reviewed, and the those documents will be validated and verified with the actual process being performed in the organization, and they collect some evidences and documentations and changes, and then upload it to the system. um, once the audit task is created, it will be assigned to some auditor, right, the owner and the assessor, and then assessor will eventually come to the project and they will have one-to-one connect with the leadership team. What are all the test cases they are testing after the deployment? What are all the approvals they are following for the change tickets? Who is actually doing the change? Is this the development team itself, or it is the run team, or there is a separate change management team? It depends what organization follows, and then they collect all those documents and upload it to the task which is the audit task was created, and they will close it. So this was just the high level, but there will be a lot of other steps involved in between, from creating task to closing it. And once the task is closed, it will be summarized at the organization level, right? We are talking about 10 projects being reviewed, and then 10 projects, some other audit team has reviewed 10 projects, then they will be accumulated to the organization level, and at high level will be reviewed, maybe CEO or CTOs, whosoever want to have it. So that way we'll ensure that we are following the release management process properly, as per the guidelines from the senior leadership team.
Yeah, awesome. That's a very important point as well in the overall process, right? Having that support, that guidance of, I mean, management, the senior management, working along with the necessary requirements that you need to fulfill in terms of actually executing the audit, right? So, and just to wrap up on all of this, guys, is just to give you a quick um, idea of what an ISMS, for example, an ISMS audit in terms of all the necessary activities. Let's say you are actually conducting an ISMS audit in a similar process as if you were conducting an IT control or processes audit, right? This is just to give you an idea of some of the activities that are involved, right? This is just at an eye level. And I strongly recommend that you take the time to actually do further research and use this information that we are sharing with you to actually do further research in terms of building your skill set. Right. So the main area of this is actually looking at the audit activities. That's one of the things that you want to become familiar with as the um, auditor, the IT auditor in this perspective. The audit activities. So in this case, they have an audit program which involves planning, definition, implementation, monitoring, review. Right. And one of those is audit activities, and this is actually broken down into commissioning the audit, having that initial meeting, right? All of these elements have various tasks and activities involving each of these elements, right? Commission the commissioning of the audit, the initial planning, collecting and evaluating information, the results, documentation and evidence, communication and management, roles and responsibilities, review of documents. Then you have a conclusion, then you have a final meeting. And in most cases, this requires a plan, right? This is where your project management skills comes into play. So you'd have normally this is done by a senior auditor within your department, right? So this is not something that we're saying that you must be able to do, but having that understanding makes you appreciate the process much better, right? So I just wanted to point that out quickly before we actually end this session and also our episode looking at the practical realities of becoming a GRC specialist. So far, we have actually looked at all of these requirements in terms of performing the regular audits of IT system processes, what is involved, the steps, the procedures, right? So, guys, these are a number of, based on this job description of a GRC specialist, right? So, these are the job responsibilities. So, you can definitely go look at a couple of job descriptions, job roles relating to GRC specialist or a GRC analyst. Compare all of these. Get a Excel sheet. That is how I normally compare these. Look at the Excel, look at the job roles, get your Excel sheet, align these, look at all of these tasks, and say, okay, these are the common set of skills, these are the common set of requirements, these are the common set of certifications. But I would say, guys, focus more on mastering and acquiring the skill set. And as you go along, then you acquire the certifications accordingly as the job requires, right? And in many cases, you can even have that negotiation, that trade off between having various. There are so many organizations that have um, budget in place for educational development that you can actually trade in terms of making those commitments. For example, the organizations which I've actually worked in before, that you will decide or make a commitment to work for an additional 2 or 3 years if it is that they pay for XY certification. So those are the various options that you can actually look at to build your skill set. So guys, learn the fundamentals, look at the job descriptions, make your alignment with someone who's in the industry, and build strong relationships. And this can definitely help to push your career to another level within the. And this is goes for just about any career path, not just cybersecurity or GRC specifically. Pradeep, what's your final take or final words on this series?
Yeah, like some of the examples. Patrick was asking what exactly we need other than the generic um, items, right? Generic skill set or fundamental skill set. Maybe go through the GRC frameworks, um, and then have understanding of how they are aligned. Go through the particular audit, risk management processes. That will really help to understand more, and this will give confidence when you talk to somebody, when you go to the interview, because you will have the prior knowledge and you can review these sessions again, ping us or get the idea. We can, yeah, work together.
Yeah, very very good note, guys. So guys, this was definitely a very great, exercise. It was a pleasure having you tuning in with us. From the start of this series. Hope that you have actually found it very valuable. And for sure, take this information, share it with um, other persons, do the necessary research, build that relationship on LinkedIn, reach out to persons, find out what it is that they do so that you can actually gain the necessary skills and experience that you require to possibly get into those areas that you really want. So guys, looking forward for future conversations like this. And Pradeep, it was indeed a pleasure having you, working with you. I mean, Pradeep actually took the time out to reach out to me to say how it is that he can actually help to contribute. Right. So I found that really exceptional. And these are the things that we recommend persons to do. Reach out to persons. Find out how can you help? What can you do? And for sure, you will definitely get the various recommendations, because the fact is that your LinkedIn profile is actually your online resume. That is where persons, recruiters, companies will see your activities, your involvement, will see the necessary recommendations that persons make about you, about your skill set and your ability to do various things. And by doing this, by being consistent, um, you might just never know who will actually open a door for you as it relates to building your career. So, guys, stay connected to the Cyber JA conversations, and we look forward to having many more of these series. So, guys, until then,